by my humble self, we are going to talk about Azure SQL Database backups, right? Uh, why I'm bringing this topic up is because some of you that are applying for jobs, um, Azure keeps coming up. Whether you've taken Azure program or not, at least this gives you at least some talking point during an interview. Some of the few projects that you've done, backup is not a new topic to most of us right now, but how do you actually do that in the cloud, right? So, and we will be implementing Azure SQL backup for backing up our production SQL servers, as well as backing up SQL databases that are in Azure. So I'll quickly go through some of the terminology that we need to know, and before I go to the demo. So first of all, what's the reason why people really need to back up, right? Now, in every given year, statistics show that some of the top reasons why companies lose data is 35% reported that it's due to hardware failure, right? Maybe VMs being corrupted, disk corruption, and so on, right? That's actually kind of 35% of them. Human errors, accidentally deleting a databases or dropping a VM or crashing servers, and human errors. We are all prone to errors. That's definitely will happen. Or theft, malicious attack. We hear that all the time, right? Hackers taking over entire data centers and asking for ransomware. Excuse me. And then that's a topical problem that will really happen. Of course, software failure, it does happen all the time, where software failure could lead to data loss. And of course, last but not the least, virus attacks, right? Virus attacks are rampant. That's why you see fields like cybersecurity that's really coming up very strong, because so long as human beings exist and so long as data exists out there, someone will always be looking for it to steal, right? How do you steal? Through ransomware, through viruses, and so on. So that will always be a problem, and it needs to be protected. So these are some of the reasons why we need to do that backup. Now in Azure, we all know what backups are all about, but backup, what is backup? If anyone is sitting here today and doesn't understand what a backup is, it's just how can I provide secure a copy of my data somewhere else, so that if a disaster was to happen, I have another copy saved somewhere else, right? In order for that to happen, I will do a backup. I will save that backup somewhere else so that I can use it. Now in Azure, there's different ways in which you can do backup. And there are a couple of terminology here that we'll look at. In Azure, we talk about subscription, which means you have to sign up to get an account in order to even to be able to use the portal. You have resource group, which saves all the resources in that resource group. And you do have resources. Whatever you save there is a resource, and you save that in a resource group. Now, when you're dealing with backups, we start talking about storage account, right? Which is more like a file share, a location where you can actually save information. For example, a backup and so on. And inside a storage account, we have what is called containers, that you can actually save, create a container and save your data inside a container. You can look at containers more like folders on your D drive. You create a drive and you create folders in there that are more like containers where you can save. Now, everything that you save on the storage account can only be accessed through access keys. And these access keys are some level of security that Microsoft leverages up there, where you can access that. You can access that through access key to be able to see them. And every storage account has what is called a URL, which is the URL provides you access to that storage account, and you need to access keys to authenticate, right? Now, in order for you to access that location where you're going to save your backups, you need a credential, right? So credentials will combine the container, the access keys, as well as the storage account name itself for you to be able to access that location. So that's some of the basic terminology that we need to know, right? Now, in order for us to even do that, we need to create a storage account and decide what type of storage account it is. And for today's exercise, I already have SQL Server pre-created in a VM, which I'll be showing you very soon. And I'll be doing the backup using the GUI as well as the script method to show how you can do the backup. Now, I'm assuming that in order for you to do that, that we already have an account, which is what I already did. I have SQL Server already created, and then I have all this done. Now, storage account, when you are creating the storage account, what happens in the storage account is that there are different types of storage account. I'm not going to go so deep into this, but a storage account offers you what is called locally redundant storage. Right? Simply means that every single time you create a storage account in Azure and save something in there, Microsoft ensures that that thing is saved 3 times. Right? So there's 3 copies of whatever you save in the storage account, and it's called a locally redundant storage. So it means copy your data synchronously 3 times within a physical location in a one region. Right? Now you can even extend that that location to a different location by creating a different storage account, as I'm going to show you soon. Now, just because of that, Microsoft ensures that you have a 99.119 high availability of the storage account. Right? So this translates down to microseconds of downtime of that storage account that you have. Right? So now you also have the option where you can create a storage account and replicate the storage account to a different region, what we call Azure Availability Zone, where the storage account is created on this region and you have multiple copies across a given region through a zone redundant storage. So everything we deal in Azure, you will always hear of redundancy, making sure that you have multiple copies of the same information saved on multiple locations. Now with zone redundant storage, you get up to 12 nines of high availability, right? Okay, and you do also have geo-redundant storage, which means you are having the data is being replicated geographically to a different location also, right? And this geo-redundant storage gives you up to 16 nines with the option of having a read-only location, right? A read-only access, which means that I can have it in a location and have users read whatever information I have on that storage account saved on a geographically different location. And with this, you're able to even go all the way now up to 16 nines of high availability. So now these are what availability stands for, translated in minutes. Now, when we talk about, let me even skip this one and go all the way to 99. When we talk about 99% availability, what this actually means in real time is that whatever you save on that particular account, Microsoft is guaranteeing you, according to the SLA, that whenever you need this information, it can only be unavailable for 3.65 days in the entire year. And you cannot go above that. If you try to access your information for 4 days straight and you are not able to, and Microsoft has given you an availability of 99%, they are going to compensate you for that. So these values are what Microsoft thinks that they're able to offer you. And if you look at it per month, it's 7.3 hours, as well as 1.6 hours per week and 14 hours per day, 40 minutes per day. Now, as we go down in the number of nines in the availability, for example, like 9 nines, you are basically talking about milliseconds of downtime in the entire year, right? So remember, 1 millisecond is equal to 1,000th of a second, right? So, so we're actually dealing with all this, and you see that in entire day, Microsoft is giving you down to microseconds, right, of downtime entire year. So this is how we're talking about 9 nines here, and with zone redundant storage, Microsoft offers you even up to 16 nines, which even lowers this value down. So you're basically, you can say that the data is always available, right? But that's how important they make sure that they take care of that. I'm going to skip this one here. Now, when we talk about backups in Azure, now there are different ways that you can do backups. Now, when we are dealing with Microsoft SQL Server databases, which are a fully managed SQL Server database, Microsoft offers you automation on that database for the backups. Right? The backups are automatically backed up, and Microsoft has its own SLA. which means that the moment you create a database in the cloud, that database is automatically backed up. And then you have the first full backup have happened, and then it goes with weekly backups. Then you have differential every 1 hour, as well as transaction that happens every 5 to 10 minutes. So what am I saying here is that if you have that 5 minutes of data loss, which is the RTO of RPO of 5 minutes that Microsoft offers to you. But you still have the option to go even with a tail log backup, provided that the database are still there, and you can still take that backup and ensure that you don't even lose the 5 minutes. Otherwise, this is taken care of automatically by Azure. You don't have to worry about it. But this is happened only when you have SQL Server databases in Azure, fully managed SQL Server, what we call a platform as a service, PaaS. Right? Now, if you decide to go to the cloud and create a virtual machine where you have SQL Server installed on it, then you have to set up your own SLA. Now, Microsoft doesn't do that. But Microsoft also, as I'm going to show you today, offers the option where you can set up a policy, which can even go all the way down to this. You have the option to set up your own policy. And once you set up that policy, going forward, it takes that policy and takes a backup for you automatically. Right? So this is some of the best ways that Microsoft takes care of to make sure that you focus on things that really matters for your environment, instead of focusing on things like this backup. Right? Now, we do have that when you create a storage account or you deploy a database in Azure, you have the option to select whether you're going with a basic, standard, and so on. Now, depending on what pricing tier you select, you have the number of days that a database might be backed up, set up automatically. For basic, it's 7 days. And for standard, right to premium, you have 35 days, as well as you could go with long-term retention policy. And Microsoft gives you all the way to 10 years. But if you save this on a Discovery Services Vault, which I'm going to show you right now, you have the option to save it up to 100 years. Okay, now, when you do a backup, when you create a resource in Azure, Microsoft offers you the option that the backup, whatever size, let's say you create a database and say, I only want to get a database that has 100 gigabytes. Now, they are gradually telling you the backup can use twice the size that you are paying for without you being charged for it. Now, when you go above the maximum size, with 2 times the size that you paid for, then they begin to charge you for that. Right? And like I said, you can have up to 35 days for this standard or premium tier, and long-term retention if you decide to set up long-term retention. Now, for today, we're going to set up what is called a recovery service vault, right? And a recovery service vault is used also for backup, especially for SQL Server that sits on a virtual machine in the cloud, right? So a recovery services vault is more like a vault itself, but it has more capabilities, right? And if you are working in your environment right now and you're confused what type of backup technology or strategy that you're going to implement for your system, you can also think about this. Do I want to let Microsoft manage everything, or do I also want to have some level of management where I can set up things like recovery services vault for my virtual machine and still be able to have Microsoft automate the backup based on a particular policy, right? So those are some of the things that you do. So I'm going to stop here and quickly go to the cloud and show you a demo on how you can actually execute this backup for your own environment. Question, please. Any question? All right. So if there are no questions, I do have. Yes. Okay. I have about 20 minutes to do that, and also to give room for Emmanuel to present his topic. So we'll go to the cloud and try to look at some of the things.
Doctor.
Yes, please.
You say on Azure, the SLA is given by you're not the one choosing the SLA, right?
Yeah, depending on what type of service you create in Azure. If you create an Azure SQL database, which is a platform as a service where Microsoft does all the management, they take care of the SLA, yes.
Oh, okay. If the SLA doesn't meet your need, so you have to change the service.
Well, if the SLA, I mean, it goes all the way down to 5 minutes, right? 5 minutes. But in a situation where you need lower than 5 minutes, you will have to go with a different resource. You will not be able to deploy an Azure SQL database where the backups are automated and taken care by Microsoft, because you can't change this. This is something fixed by Microsoft. So there's so many things in the cloud that are not possible because the way Microsoft manages it. So if you find yourself in a situation where what Microsoft offers, it doesn't meet your own need, you have to look for a different deployment model.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Any more questions? Okay, all right. So, so I'm going to quickly show you, and in order for us to not to spend so much time, I decided to pre-create a couple of resources before this class today. And I'm going to show you what I did, and I'll also show you how I did it. I created it without actually executing, just so you know. Now, you can see here, I have what is called a SQL Server, and this is an Azure SQL Server, which is a fully managed SQL Server. Now you have a SQL database that sits on this SQL Server that I created called KiawiTech. You have network watchers. I have what is called here a virtual network, and I have a virtual machine as well as SQL virtual machine. Now, a couple of public IP addresses and some disks and some databases. Right now, there are two different ways that you're going to look at this. As a SQL database, where you create a database from other exercises in this Tuesday class where we demonstrated how you can create a database in Azure and how you can also move information to a database. Here, this is a SQL database which is fully managed, platform as a service, PaaS. Right? Now, this sits on a logical container called a SQL Server. Now, this is not a server on its own, like where you manage the disks, you patch it, you take care of updates, and so on. This is fully taken care by Microsoft. That's why when you select a platform as a service, Microsoft ensures that they take care of all this for you. Now, on the same technology, we have here a virtual machine with SQL Server installed in it. Now, Microsoft gives you the flexibility to be able to take care of the management of this, which means you are going to be responsible for the backups, as well as responsible for patching the servers and maintaining the servers. Right? Now, let's just quickly go with the first one, which is a fully managed SQL Server. And to create that, it's very simple method. You click on Home, and you can go on your resource and say, I want to create a new resource. I need to create with a database. You select on databases, and I need to create with a SQL Server database. All right, SQL database. If I click on it, it opens a new window where I'm going to provision the database. I'm just going to show you what I did so we can move on from there. So here, you are going to select a resource group, which is like a logical container that holds your resources. And then you're going to provide a name for the SQL database, as well as the server itself. Now, if you don't have a server, you have to create one. Databases don't reside in thin air. Even though Microsoft manages it, it still has to sit on a server. The only difference is that Microsoft takes care of that server for you. Right? Now you can decide the compute power. How much CPU and memory do you want to throw on the server? Right? And the higher the CPU you select, the more expensive this database is. For example, if I was just to go in here and create a new database called KiawiTech, for example, and decide I want to create my own server. If I click on the server name has to be unique. I already have a server called KiawiTech here, but if I try to use that to use the same name, it will say the server is already there. Right? If I try to use the same name, it says the specified name is already in use. So you need to use a name that is unique. So I may add a one in front of that, and it sees that it takes that. I can go ahead and put a password to that username. Maybe I put student here, and I put a password. For example.
Doctor, can you please, sorry, Doctor, can you increase the font? It's pretty little, so people can really see though.
Is it better now?
Yeah, I think this should be much better. Thank you.
All right, okay, good. So after this now, you need to go ahead and confirm the location where you want to save your server, and then you can move on to next. Why is it not letting me? I was just trying to show you before I move to next, but looks like unless I do it right, it will not let me move to next. Okay, now it matches. Okay, now you click OK. It will go in now and create that new server. Next offers you the possibility, how do you want to access the server? You want user to be able to access it with public access or not? Yes, I want that. If you don't want public access, you can go to private, right? And then the next thing is you can select to create an empty database or create a database that already have some sample. And it tells you if you use that, it will use this eventual work as a sample database to create. And you go on task, review, and you create. And it tells you this is how much this is going to charge you every month for the database that I created. So I'm not going to create it because I already created one. So I'm going to just cancel this out and go back to my resources. And I can show you, this is the server that I created. So if I click on this server, and I open this server, scroll all the way down at the bottom, it will show me the databases that sit on this server, right? Okay, so this database sits on this server, and I can literally open up SSMS on my local machine and connect directly to this because this server has public access, and I can access that via public internet, right? And remember, you have to make sure that you allow your IP address to be able to access that. So probably sometime when you do it, unless you ask the IP address, like my IP address is already added here, you will not be able to. To do that is very simple. If you just click on add IP, you see that it pops up your IP address here, you save it, and it will allow your own local internet public IP address to be able to access this server, right? So this is, so now let me open SSMS. I thought I clicked that, please, it cannot. All right. Okay, so that's one. Another thing that you want to look at it is this. If I go back to this server, for example, and I scroll down to this database here, and I see one of these databases, for example, Webinar DB, for example. Now, I click on this Webinar DB. So what you see here, you have this option where if you scroll all the way on the bottom section here, hold on here, let me, okay. So this one gives you a restore button, which means that if something was to happen and you need to restore, you just need to click here and you're able to restore the database, right? But at this moment, I need to show you how to do the backup, but to see that, you need to go back to the server where we came back from. And on this server, you have this option here that says backups, right? So these backups here, these are something that you don't even take it by yourself. If you just click on backup, it already shows you the last backups that are here on the server, right? They're automatically backed up. You don't do the backup yourself. It tells me that this server has been backed up and it was last backed up at 1:53 UTC. That's Coordinated Universal Time. This is equal to GMT if you want to translate that, right? So these are the databases that has been backed up automatically. Remember what I said. When you provision a database, Microsoft automatically takes a backup, and then you can literally, and then it takes a differential every hour, and then transaction every 5 minutes, right? So you can see that I didn't have to do anything here. It's already been backed up because I selected an Azure SQL database where Microsoft manages everything for me. So let's assume that this database was to have an issue and I was asked to restore. It's very simple. I can simply just go on that server, scroll down to the database that needs to be restored. I'm still on the server, so I need to go to, okay, I'm already on the database itself. And I here, restore. Now it goes to the section where Microsoft saves it. This is a very good thing where when Microsoft manages databases for you and the backups, you are free of hacker attacks, because this is something where hackers will literally have to get into the system and understand where Microsoft saves the backup. And this is something quite difficult. I know of a situation where a company was attacked and all the backups that were on the VM were completely taken over, except the SQL databases that were not affected. Right? So if you click on this, what Microsoft does is you cannot overwrite an existing database. Just like we on on-premise where we can override a database, here you cannot override a database. So if I click on review, you can see here that the database has automatically added a number in front of that, right? So I can click on create, and this database will be restored with a different name, right? So I open SSMS now. Let me bring this one here. So if I open SSMS, this is on my local computer, right? And I want to connect to this server where my databases are running on. So it's as simple as that. I can literally go back to the server where I want to connect to. This is the server I created, SQL Server. If I click on it, it gives me that URL where I can connect to that server. This is the URL, the server name. So I can copy this and then take it to my SSMS, click to connect, and literally put this server name in here and change this one to a SQL authentication and provide a name that I used. So it was, I think it was cluster admin, and then the password was this. And connect. Okay, so let me make sure I didn't give a different name. The name was, oh, sorry, student, actually. All right, so student, connect. See, from my local machine, I'm able to just directly make a connection to Azure SQL Server. And if I expand on databases, I can clearly see the databases that are there. And I see that there's one which is currently being restored, which is the one that I just restored. Right? As simple as that. Once it's done restoring, I should see it's still restoring. Right? So this is how you can use your Azure SQL databases to for your backup purposes, where Microsoft does everything on the background for you. Right? Now, so
let me just ask a question on this before you,
yes.
You move forward, Doctor, because yes, I know it might be a question on so many people's mind.
Yes, please.
Yeah. You see, when you say the database cannot be override in
yes.
Azure.
Yes.
So, and now if you restore the database now with a different name, how are application streams that are already having connections to the previous database, how are they going to connect to the new database? Considering that the name now is different.
Yes, that's a very good question. So if you are managing SQL databases and you are asked to restore a database, all what you need to do is you have to restore it with a different name. And once you're done restoring, let me make sure it's done now. Once you're done restoring that database, it's still restoring. What you're going to do is you verify that it's restored correctly, that everything looks well. Go ahead and drop this database and then rename this back to the name.
You can also flip it, right?
Well, flip. What do you mean by flip it?
Like you name the one was there like old one, and then you change the new one to
yes, you can also do that. If you don't want to drop it, if you don't want to drop the old one, you can just flip it. But if you verify and you're sure that it's there, you can go ahead and delete it. But the good thing with Azure is that if I delete this database mistakenly, and it happens that this was not the right database I was supposed to delete, because they are all fully managed. Microsoft is so smart, and it just helps you with all that, right? say I mistakenly delete this database, it's now gone. If you go back to the portal, it's very simple. If you go back to the server where that database was sitting on, we have what is called here deleted databases, right? Where you can literally just click on it. After a couple of times, it's going to show up here. It's going to show up here up to the point where the database was dropped, and you can bring it back online. As simple as that. Okay.
Okay, I see in that process, I see a very big window of downtime, but you already showed us a while ago that the downtime here is very minimal. So during this period, how is the downtime managed to make sure that we achieve that 99%, 99.999% that you presented?
Okay, so remember the 99.999 I was showing you is for a storage account where you decide to, like for example, this is my on-prem server, and on this on-prems, I have SQL Server sitting on it. If I decide to use Microsoft storage as my backup strategy, I can literally back up this my local servers databases from on-prem to Azure, and that 99, Microsoft is promising you that 99 is for the storage account. But for Azure SQL databases, the uptime is 99.9929. Right? But still, in this case, it's not like Microsoft does not have their services. You are the one that is triggering a backup and dropping the other one. They are not responsible for how you manage it, but they're responsible for the fact that if you need to access that database, it will be there. Right? So
thank you for that clarification.
Okay. All right. Okay. So in view of time, I'm not going to. I wanted to quickly show you how you can actually use this on-prem SQL Server, back up this on-prem SQL Server into Azure and restore it. But I don't have so much time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch to the next deployment model, which is a virtual machine. What if it's a virtual machine where you are responsible for the backups, right? You're responsible for backup and you have to do the backup yourself. How will you do that? So it is very simple to do that. If I go back to my portal, prior to this class, I had created a virtual machine. And this virtual machine is here. You can see it. This is a virtual machine that has SQL Server already installed in it. I call it VM1. And it has this SQL Server already installed. So I can literally connect to that virtual machine. To connect, you just need to open that virtual machine. And you have the connection button, and it asks you to download an RDP session, remote desktop connection session. You can download it. I already downloaded it. And when you download, you can connect to that VM. And when that connects, this is a VM that I have here in Azure. All right. So you see clearly here, the VM sits here. And this VM, I didn't have to install SQL Server. I bought a server that had SQL Server already. I bought an image that has SQL Server already pre-installed. All right, as simple as that. Which, if you go open this drive, you can clearly see there's a log, there's a data, right? There's a log drive, there's a log drive, there's a data drive, there's a temporary storage. And if you open these, you can clearly see here there are no data because there are no databases on it. Right? Log is empty. There's nothing in here. So what I mean is you can literally buy an image that has SQL Server, and you see here the SQL Server that I bought was the 2019 Developer Edition, and it has its own configuration manager, and it also has SSMS. So I can launch the SSMS now on the platform. So with this virtual machine, you are responsible for the backups that will happen on this. Microsoft doesn't take care of it. You are responsible, but it isn't go out. It gives you more flexibility to be able to manage this backup, as I'm going to show you soon. All right. So you have this, and once you launch, and you can even open your configuration manager, and you see that SQL Server is running, and it runs on an empty account. You can literally change it. If you have this server connected to the domain, you can also do the change. All right. So if you check here, you see that it's not linked to any domain. It's just a single SQL Server that sits somewhere else. All right, so while I'm waiting for the SSMS to pop up, I can show you now, because you have to manage this yourself. Microsoft gives you the option. You can decide and back up these databases and save them locally. But then you run a risk where they can also be corrupted because they're sitting on a local server, or something could happen where ransomware attacks takes over all that, right? So Microsoft offers you that. Okay, now it's open. So I can connect to this VM. And you see that it's just like a regular SQL Server that you have on-prem, but this time around it's in the cloud. But here, I don't have any databases. So any database that I create here, I am responsible 100% for that database. So let me create one, DB1, for example. And create another database called DB2. And let me just create one last one called DB3. All right, so we have a couple of databases here. Now, this database, we can set up a backup policy and save this database somewhere locally, all right, which is prone to attack. Some companies could decide that, okay, we're going to create a storage account. Once we back up this database, we'll copy this to that storage account. That is also acceptable, right? But what I'm going to show you today is Microsoft also offers you an automation. And this is something where I really want most of you that are already working on virtual machines, how you can also have Microsoft automate those backup for you, right? So we have what is called Azure Services Vault, right? Recovery Services Vault. So you can literally go back here and create that service and use that service to automate your backup policy. And it's very simple. I'm just going to click on Add, and I'm going to type here Recovery Services Vault. And I should be able to see that here. I just type Vault. I should be able to see that. No. Okay, so let me do it up here. All right. So recovery. Normally it should pop up here. Recovery Services Vault. Now, if I open that, you see that I don't have anyone, so I can create one and use that Recovery Services Vault for my automated backup policies. So it creates it on this subscription, and it needs a resource group. I created one for this webinar. So I have a resource group. So I'm just going to call that one here backup. So KiawiTech backup, right? So, and I leave it this location, review it, and create. So now this Services Vault can now be used to automate my backup policy, right? It's done, so I can go to that resource. Now you see on this resource now, if you scroll down, you see backup, right? So if you click on this backup, it tells you what type of backup do you want to take. Now I can say I want to take a backup on Azure. You can also use this to back up your on-premises databases, but for now, the server sits in Azure. So I can do this backup, and I can back up either a virtual machine, I can back up an Azure file share, I can back up SQL Server in Azure VM, I can back up SAP HANA in Azure VM. So today, we want to just back up SQL Server that sits on a virtual machine. So if I select this option, it tells me I don't have any database, but I can discover the databases. So if I click on Discover Databases, it's going to scan my entire environment and see if I have any servers available where I can discover the databases. And it says here, for always on cluster, ensure that all the nodes, bracket VM, of the cluster in the same geo are selected, right? If you want to use it. Select nodes VM will be registered on the vault. So here, it's found that the only VM that I had was VM1, so I can select that VM, right? So, and I say discover databases. And of course, it's not going to work because for this to work, Microsoft there must be a certain account that needs to be created, which needs a sysadmin right inside the database to be able to do this automation of backups for me. All right. So when this run, you can go on detail and you see there's nothing here for now. So once this finishes, you are going to see that the databases that sit on this VM we have right now, 3 of them, we'll be able to pick them up and do the backup. Any question so far?
Hey, Doc.
Yes.
So when you are setting up this automation, there's no way that you can schedule it. You know, you just do it once, and I don't see any scheduler.
It will work. Once it's done, you can see that you are able to scale it down. Right? So once the automation is over, you can create a schedule, and the schedule falls under what is called policies. Right? You can create a policy and decide that how often do I want to have my backups? Right? Maybe take transaction log backup, differential, key log, and so on, and a full backup, and so on. And you can also tell SQL Server, what time do I want these backups to run for me? So that's the schedule that you're talking about.
So where is the schedule tab?
Okay, so while this is going on, let me just open a new tab and hold on while this is going on. So at this point here, we can go back to the account. Expect that this is good. Okay. So approve. Yes. Okay. So this is still deploying. Okay. So now I can go and show you the schedule. While the other one is deploying, searching for the resources, you can see here, if I go back to the vault, this is the recovery vault that I just created. This vault. And on this vault, what do we have? We have backups. That's where we'll schedule our backup. So once we go on backup items, this will show you all the backups items that sit on this vault, right? You can put a HANA, a SQL Server in VM, a file share, Azure backup server, and so on, right? But if you go down here, we have what is called backup policies. Now, what this backup policy does is you can create a policy. Automatically, it has what is called hourly log backup policy, but you can create your own policy. I can say, I want to create a policy, and I want to specify whatever policy I want to create. I want to create a policy for SQL Server in a VM. And I select that, and it will tell me, okay, how do you want to call that policy? It's daily backup, right? I can call that policy a daily backup, and it automatically has these values here. It takes a daily backup at 7, and it retains it for 180 days. It takes a weekly backup and keeps it for 140 for 4 weeks. It takes a monthly and keeps it for 60 months, and it takes a yearly and keeps it for 10 years. Well, if this is not what you want, you can literally go here, select this option here, edit, and say, I want to have that weekly backup run every day at, let's say, 1 a.m. Let it run every day at 1 a.m. And I can select my own time zone this time around. If you like, you can keep it a universal coordinated time, or I can say I want to run it at Central Standard Time, which is +6, right? -6, not plus. Central Standard, right? I want to run a Central Standard, and I want to keep it, depending on a company policy, maybe for 60 days. I also want to take a weekly and keep it maybe for 12 weeks or maybe 40 weeks, depending on how I want it. A yearly backup, monthly, keep it for 12 months, and then take a yearly backup and keep it for 5 years. Once I schedule this, set it now, and create this policy will be created, and let's check whether this is done. Now, this is done now. Now, what you're going to see here is it is done, but if I go back and try to discover the databases, backup, and here, I'm backing up, it's this. I can go on detail. What you're going to see here is, it says it is now ready. And there are how many databases? 6 databases found. Why 6? Because this database has 1, 2, 3, and of course, it has to also take the system databases. Right? So it discovers that. So because of that, now I can now say, okay, I have the databases. So I'm just going to go ahead and on my backup, say I want SQL Server that runs on that. As I've already discovered that, configure the backup for me. So this time around, I can select the policy that I created, daily backup, right? And it tells me that, right? And the next thing that I want to do is log backup. Okay, so it says log backup for the databases will be skipped, yes. But I need to add the resource. What do I want to use in this? I need to click on this and I say, I have this server that I want to back up. And auto protect simply means right now, if I turn it on, every single time I add an extra database, it will automatically protect it. I don't have to come back and reconfigure it. But if you turn it off, you have to manually add it to the backup, right? So right now I have 6, so fine. I want to auto protect, okay. And then enable backup, and that's it, done. Once it's finished, any day that it's done now, but now it's too early for you to see. But if you go on backup jobs, you'll be able to, once it starts running, you'll be able to see the jobs that are running here. It's just too early. But if I give a couple of minutes, you'll be able to see the jobs running here, and you can use that job. Once it's done backing up, you can always go back on this account and go to backup items and check here. It's not showing up, and select. Let's say you selected. Let me go back step. I go on. Let me check again. Okay, so there you go. Now the jobs are running now. You can see everything is in progress. So once this is done, if this is done and you check on backup items, it's going to take a couple of minutes. If you go back now on backup items, you will see it showing up here on SQL Server and on VM. And if you click on it, it will now show you all the backups that you've taken. Just click on that, restore, and you're done. As simple as that. So I really think that this is a very good way in which Microsoft has made it so easy for us to manage our backups that you can literally use this for your backup policy on-prem. So this is what I wanted to show you. I think I'm out of time. I'll stop here and I'll take 1 or 2 questions.
I have a question.
Yes, please, go ahead.
What happens with the deleted databases? I saw something on the left panel where you delete a database by mistake.
Yes.
Does Azure keeps it for some time before it finally goes up, or you have to manually go and take it out yourself?
14 days. It keeps it for 14 days. And after that, you cannot have it again.
Okay.
Yeah, my question, the Azure Recovery Services Vault, you can use it for your on-prem virtual machine backup?
Yes, you can use it for your on-prem virtual machine. Like, for example, when we went here on backups, for example, on the backup, it asks you where you want to, where is your workload running? Is it in Azure?
You're not sharing your screen. You're not sharing your screen.
Oh, sorry. I thought a couple of people mentioned that my screen was too dark for them to see. I'm just seeing, sorry guys, I'm just seeing it right now. Normally I should change it so here. Okay, I'm already done, so I'm going to just leave it like that. But anyway, but here you have the option that if you go on backups, right? On backup, you have to decide whether your workload is running in Azure, Azure Stack, or on premises. If you go on premises, you can literally set it up. You must have configured VPN connection to be able to do that, right? So, but you can use this for both purposes, right? If I go now on my jobs, probably the jobs are done now. Oh, they're still running. No, they're still running. Anyway, I'll stop here, but that's simply the process in which you can use Azure, set up a backup policy for your Azure virtual machine or your Azure SQL servers.
Oh, please, I have a quick question.